All right, hi everybody. I want to welcome you. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Linda Rapka and I am the president of the Los Angeles Young Workers. And we're very excited to welcome you this evening. Looking forward to a great discussion. I wanted to thank, first off, Crystal Herrera. She is one of our panelists. She is the vice president of LA Young Workers and she will do further introductions later, but she put together this amazing panel. So thank you so much for all of your work. And special thanks to Selena Barron, who is going to be our moderator and who put together just an amazing assortment of questions and is going to really lead a cool discussion. So very excited. I also want to thank my home local, the American Federation of Musicians Local 47, for use of their pro Zoom account for this webinar. And just a few housekeeping items. Everyone is muted, but if you want to ask questions, feel free to use the Q&A feature in Zoom or use the raise hand feature if you want to request to speak, and I can go ahead and unmute you when we get to that portion of the presentation. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to our distinguished panel. So. All right, there we go.
Okay, so does everyone want to introduce themselves? We'll start alphabetically because that's just easy.
So
that would be Adan first.
So hello everyone. My name is Adan Alvarez. I am the communications director for Teamsters Local 396. We represent UPS and sanitation workers across Southern California, including Los Angeles County. And it's great to be with you all here this evening.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Amir Ali, IBEW Inside Wireman, 5th year apprentice.
My name is Crystal Herrera, IBEW Local 11. Like Linda was saying, I'm also a vice president of LA Young Workers.
And it looks like we just lost David really quickly. So Luz Elena?
Hi, my name is Luz Elena. I am a wastewater operator for the sanitation districts of LA. Our workplace is represented by SEIU 721. And yeah, good, happy to be here.
Great, thanks. And hopefully we can get David back in a second. Not sure what's going on there. And I'm gonna move into sharing a slideshow, which, oops. Now let's see, screen share. Okay. I'm trying to make sure that I can share my screen and I can't seem to find that button right now, of course. Let's go with this one. And here we go. Can everyone see this? Yes? Yes, cool, sweet.
Yeah,
okay. So young workers on the front lines during COVID-19, a discussion on the intersection of worker justice and social justice. So we have introduced our panelists and we'll get David in as soon as possible.
There he is. I think he just joined again.
Oh, sweet. David, do you want to say hi to everyone?
Hi. Oh, can you hear me? I can't hear anyone, so I'm assuming that I'm talking right now. But yeah, yeah, I made it on. Hello. Wait, can you? Yeah. Thank you. Okay, I'm sorry.
Hey, David, you're on mute.
Hello?
There you go. Hello.
Okay. No, yeah. So my name's David. I'm Crystal's brother. I'm working at Sprouts. So yeah, I just logged on. Sorry about that. How does this work?
Okay, sweet. So let's see. So LA workers on the front lines during COVID-19, a discussion on the intersection of worker justice and social justice is like a massive thing to try to put together. So in order to kind of talk about that in the best way, we're going to go ahead and break it down. We are going to ask our panelists a group of questions, but first we're going to kind of pull this apart, and then also we'll have some opportunities for people to contribute to a poll. Also, we'll have, you can contribute in the question and answer option, and also just use the chat. So however, whatever feels best and works best for you, please join us in this conversation. So first, we're going to just call attention to this image. Maybe you've seen it, maybe you haven't, but it's the intersecting axes of privilege and domination and oppression. So horizontally, you'll see the domination line, and everything above that is someone who has or is a position in which you might have privilege. And everything below that might be, would be a situation where you, for that type of thing, you have oppression. And there's a societal resistance towards it. So usually in America, in California, in Los Angeles, our culture is totally obsessed with youth and being young and beautiful and all those things. But in the workplace, that's not always the case. So when someone is new to their career or when they're new to their union, they don't necessarily have the upper hand. So we're just gonna flip it for just the reality of this situation. Sometimes things are that way depending upon the space that you're in or the specifics. So also, if you have family or you're independently wealthy, you have privilege in that way. And then, you know, the whole rest of us who need to work to pay rent and a mortgage that's exorbitant here in Los Angeles County. And also, let's say for most people, they need to be able to afford to have health insurance. It's almost always tied to your employer, unless you want to shell out money for that Obamacare, which is nice but expensive, I've heard. So we have these two things here. If you're young, you're newer to your career and to your union. And then if you're a worker, there's the high cost of housing in Los Angeles. And also your health insurance is usually tied to your employment. So right now I'm gonna see if I can, or maybe if Linda would help me out in populating the poll where people could share their age demographics and whether or not they're working right now. And then, so if you're a younger worker, that's gonna be anyone, I don't know why we started at 5, but we did. Anyone who is 5 to 39. So millennials is a big group. And then let's see, I don't know if everyone sees that giant poll in the center of my page, but it's large. And then people can answer those questions, and then we'll go on to if you're a worker, right? If you're working from home, like if your job has that option, if you're working at your original job site, or if you're working in both spaces. Some people are splitting back and forth. And then if you can't currently work for whatever that reason is. I'm not sure how to, does everyone see me moving this around? Because this, okay, cool. All right, just wondering, I'm not sure. So let's see, where do we, oh, okay.
All right, so we just shared those poll results.
Sweet. So yeah, so the generation you belong into, and now maybe we'll go into what is your current work situation if you're working from home, or not, or if you're at a job site, or you're working in both places, or if you can't work at all because whatever the reason is. And then maybe if that's something you want to share in the chat, please do. And then if not, please don't feel like you have to in any way. But it's kind of cool. And then the polling is going to be anonymous, so don't worry about like, no one's going to go show up and be like, hey, you said, because we don't know who's answering what questions in which way. So there we go. I don't know if we should, I feel like most people have voted, so maybe we'll just go ahead and move on from this. Linda, I'm gonna press end poll.
I'll share those results now too.
Okay, sweet.
Okay, so yeah, it looks like it's pretty split with people working from home and working on the job site, just by a thin margin there.
Sweet. Okay, I'm gonna close this for right now myself, and then we'll go ahead and move on, or not. So also another thing that's coming into play for people is during COVID-19, if they are healthy, generally healthy, if you are a non-disabled person, and then underneath that domination, or where there's often oppression, is for people who are sick, or who have medical complications or medical issues, or are disabled. So when COVID-19 happened, it brought everyone, like, even if you were generally a healthy individual, it brought everyone right up close to the line of feeling like, oh, this is like, I could really get sick in this way. And because that's what a pandemic is, it brought everyone to the precipice of serious illness. And so now we're going to ask people, if you were to get sick, do you have paid sick time, or do you not have paid sick time? Does your employer or your union offer that to you, or is that not a benefit you have? I don't know, Linda, if you could launch that poll, Leo.
Here we go.
Sweet. And then maybe if you want to also add that to like the chat, if you have it, there are a good number of people who realize that this is a significant benefit that their union or their employer should offer them. So if your union or your employer offers it to you, maybe drop that local or that employer in the chat, so that people could maybe reach out and see, like, yes, these are the type of people who have this, and they could maybe help me in getting it. So much of what LA Young Workers is about is really getting together and trying to make sure that we can all have, share the benefits that we have, and help our other unions and other workers have that benefit. Okay, so I'm gonna close this now. And so what puts somebody at high risk? I wonder if I can move this here. There we go. Just so that's not in anyone's way. So if you're high risk of COVID-19, there's a whole slew of things. And I'm sure if you have one of these things, you became very, very aware of that. And then also you might be low risk. And then, so if we could launch that poll where people are talking about, like, yes, I identify as high risk, and no, I feel like pretty low risk. And if you're low risk, that's generally someone who is young, or you don't have any medical conditions, no health conditions, you're not disabled, you don't regularly have to go to the doctor. I know having to go to a medical facility right now these days is super stressful, just because of all the tents going on and you can't bring anybody. So even if what you had was easily maintained, having to go to a medical facility these days is super intense.
So Selena, sorry, are you looking to do the question for those who are currently working or those concerns about work?
Maybe if people, do we have a specific poll question for whether people feel safe or unsafe at work, or if they are at high risk or low risk for COVID-19?
We have lunch both. We have a couple, so we'll do one first here.
We got all the things going on.
So this poll now is for those who are working, and there are 3 questions. So I'll leave it up a little bit longer.
Okay, cool. I'll just read the questions. If you're currently working on the job site, if you are working from home, when do you expect to go back to your job site? And what has your workload been since the pandemic hit? Some people are feeling like really slow, and some people have way more work they're doing these days. And then I know some people have been picking up extra shifts because people are choosing to stay home. So there's a whole lot of dynamics going on that are just affecting people. Let's see. I wonder if okay, Linda, you
All right,
are
it looks like 41% have voted, so I'll go ahead and end this.
sweet. Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. I'm glad to see that people feel safe at work. And I know maybe that might have changed, right? When COVID-19 first hit, things maybe seemed super scary. And as things moved on, people are feeling more and more secure.
And I'd be curious too to know like how our panelists feel. Like, do you guys feel safe at work?
Yeah, we're gonna get to those questions in a second. Let me just go ahead and move forward here a little bit. Right, so we got all this going on, COVID-19, being a young worker. And then also, when we started having this conversation about having this chat, that's when I think it was shortly after riots had begun, and it seemed like really unthinkable at this time to discuss anything without discussing the overwhelming oppression and the murder of our Black sisters and brothers just in this world we live in. And racial privilege is a very, very real thing in the world we live in, and also in our unions and in organizations and in basically anything with the structure, which is everything for the most part. So racial justice is something that we wanted to bring up and acknowledge, and because it's such a big part of worker justice, if you're a Black or Indigenous person of color, you're a Black and Indigenous person of color in the workplace. And so social justice, racial justice is a large piece to social justice, and you can't have one or any of these things without the other. We're also going to discuss towards the end systematic oppression, which is rules or laws of a place that create unequal treatment of a specific social identity group or groups. So there we have that. So just everyone just wants to look back at this whole axis of intensity right here. And then we will bring it all together in this circle of craziness that are really going on for people, because everyone has a lot of things going on. So now we'll go ahead and ask our panelists, right? What do you do? Have you worked during the COVID-19 pandemic? Do you feel like you had a choice to work, or did you feel like you had a time a choice to take that time off? And what made you feel like you did or did not have that ability to choose? And maybe we'll start with Adan, if you could answer that question for us.
Yes, thank you. So I have been working during the coronavirus pandemic as the communications director of Teamsters Local 396. So we represent what have been labeled essential workers. So all of our members have been working throughout this pandemic, whether they are UPS workers that process and deliver packages, or our sanitation workers that pick up waste and recycling materials from communities throughout Southern California. And so I've been actually quite busy throughout this time in terms of communicating with our members, in terms of the different protections that they have under the law, as well as any updates that we may have. So the coronavirus pandemic has had very interesting impact on workers, whereas either workers have lost their jobs, or in the case of workers that are working, so for example, our members are working, which is a good thing. However, it's important for us to fight to ensure that they are safe on the job, that they have the protections that they need. And as a union, that's part of our job, is to inform our members about their rights, to help secure the protections that they need. And so as a communications director, I've been busy, getting information out to our members, ensuring that they have the tools that they need to fight for their rights. And so it's definitely been an ongoing process, particularly for our members who, interestingly enough, have been busier more than ever. So for example, at UPS, because a lot of folks have been working from home, that means more people are ordering things online and requesting that they be delivered to their homes. So our UPS members who process and deliver packages have been very busy. We have to make sure that they are working safely and that they have the protections that they need.
Sweet, thank you. Okay, Amir, do you want to share what do you do, and have you worked during the pandemic, and do you feel like you had a choice to work, and what made you feel like you had that choice?
Okay, so what I do exactly, like I said, I'm an inside wireman. I'm basically working on the Crenshaw corridor, which is a big LA infrastructure project. So fortunately, I've been able to work throughout the entire pandemic. It's been really crazy because as electricians, we're always working, around other people. And sometimes you find it, really difficult to maintain those social distancing guidelines because, a lot of things that we do on a daily basis require us to be, within a closer proximity than, say, 6 feet. But one thing that I will say, I won't name my contractor, but my contractor did a very good job of making it clear, that if you want to take time off, or if you felt that, it was unsafe for you to work, or you want to be with your family, that was fine. They actually recommended, 14-day quarantines in the beginning, because in the beginning, of course, no one knows what's going on. No one had any prior pandemics to reference. So this whole thing has been a kind of learn as you go type thing. As more data comes in, we learn how it affects people. So in the beginning, it was a little sketchy because, people were scared to cough or sneeze because they were scared of being sent home, for 14 days or whatever the case may be. But I feel like my contractor was on top of it. And because of that, it made those of us who continued to work feel safer about coming to work. Every week, there are new guidelines, new PPE involved, personal protective equipment, things of that sort. So I can say that I've been, for the most part, I feel pretty safe about going to work, and have been throughout this entire pandemic.
Sweet. Well, I'm glad you feel safe. Let's see who's next. Crystal.
That's me. Crystal here. Hey guys. So I'm also an inside wireman with Local 11. I was working on the same project as Amir, the Crenshaw line, just a different contractor. And I did not feel safe. I actually have hypertension. So because of that, I'm considered, I guess, high risk. I do take medication for it. And I guess it's specifically doing something to the body where it has like bad effects with COVID-19. And then also me being a Black woman and with Black people, you know, consistently kind of getting not so good healthcare at times. I didn't feel comfortable me getting sick and being put in a situation where I wasn't able to be in the hospital with somebody to advocate for me. If I were to be sent to the hospital and be on a respirator or something like that, I would have had to have been there alone. And I think we've all seen what COVID-19 is doing to our Black and brown communities. So I didn't want to leave that up to a contractor or to anyone else. Like, so I was able to qualify for state benefits. So I made the decision to stay home and stay safe. Like Selena said, I'm glad that Amir, you were able to continue working. That's awesome. But because of that other factor, I didn't feel comfortable.
Okay, David, do you want to share with us if you continued working and why you made that choice and what made you feel like you could choose?
Yeah, so before COVID hit, I just started substitute teaching for El Rancho School District, and about a week in, after a week of assignments, that's when everything closed down. So I was working there, and then I was working at the Brea Improv, and within about 2 days, I had no income, and it coincided with the timing of just getting a new apartment. I had just moved out, so I felt like I didn't have a choice because overnight my income's gone, and I didn't want to have to rely on unemployment because I'd been working in Washington, and I quit, so it wasn't guaranteed that I'd be like eligible for any benefits. So the next morning, me and my roommate went to the nearest grocery store, which is Sprouts, and we applied. And they were hiring due to COVID, so they must have hired about 20 workers that week, and I got hired as a retail clerk. And in terms of safety, I guess I'm kind of privileged in that I'm young and I live exclusively with just one other person who's also my age. So we're very low risk. And in terms of safety, yeah, I didn't feel endangered or anything like that. My position's in the bulk department, so I'm very isolated from customers. I rarely interact with the people. And our company's pretty good about we have sanitation stations, and they required wearing masks immediately, and so yeah, they've been taking their safety seriously. But yeah, no, I haven't felt threatened or anything. So yeah.
Okay, cool. And Lucelena, how's that going for you?
So again, hi, I'm Lucelena, and I work as a wastewater operator for the Los Angeles County Sanitation Districts, and SEIU 721 is the union that represents us. So the sanitation districts basically covers workers at like sewage treatment plants, so wastewater plants, and landfills, and all of our workplaces were considered essential by like the state of California. So there are lots of different kinds of workers at our workplace. We've got across the district, so there's like office workers, engineers, management workers, but those of us who are operators or the folks who are mechanics or maintenance workers and electricians, like we did not have a choice to stay home. We had to make sure to come to work. We actually got a phone call in the middle of the night with a message after quarantine was settled that said, you have to come to work. But I think except for folks who are 65 years or older and folks who were high risk, they actually at some point got sent home, but the rest of us for sure had to show up. So in terms of like what made me feel whether or not I had choice, I definitely didn't have a choice to go to work. But what I did feel like is because our union contract does have sick time, I could, if push came to shove, use my sick time if I started feeling unsafe at work. Now but you know, also let's be real, like a lot of our workplaces have a culture of looking down on people who use their sick time or look at it as if people were like abusing sick time or it's just because everybody's hungover or something. You know, I feel like there's a lot of culture around not using our sick time as if we didn't earn it. And so I think one of the things that I knew would not work is if we all had to burn our regular sick time that we would still need for the rest of the year, people would probably not stay home or shelter at home. So if our employer did not actually do the job of like giving us COVID-19 sick time, folks were not going to stay home. So so I did feel I had the choice because obviously I have sick time, but because of the culture in our workplace, I feel like it has a different impact on whether or not people actually use or will choose to use their sick time if they're sick. So I can share more about other stuff later.
Sweet, thanks for sharing. And yeah, the culture of your workplace is a super big contributor to whether people will or will not use the benefits that are afforded them. Let's move on to the next one, which is more or less, do you feel safe at work right now if you're going into work? And then young people are typically considered to be a lower risk demographic for contracting COVID-19. Do you feel that being considered a young worker puts you at an advantage? So like it's not so risky for you, or less, or at a disadvantage in some way? And also, what precautions has your employer taken to try to keep workers safe? And Adan, do you want to start with that? And then maybe you could speak to like specifically for you as someone who I'm assuming you work in an office space, and then also like for your workers, because those are two separate things.
Sure. So I'm lucky enough that you know, in terms of my workspace at the local union office, we have been able to implement the appropriate safety protocols, including disinfecting, masks, and also limiting the amount of staff in our office. So, for example, we've only keeping the essential office staff that we need. So, usually every staff member has an office at the building. But at this point, with only the absolute necessary staff, including myself, are there. And then in terms of our members, to be honest, it's been a fight to ensure that even with the union contract, it's always about enforcement, right? So ensuring that employers are providing the adequate PPE, in social distancing, and all of those things, which initially were not necessarily the case, because at the end of the day, a lot of these employers see things like PPE as in social distancing as things that impact production and as a cost, unfortunately, but it does come down. That's the way it's dollars and cents to a lot of these businesses. So having to provide, for a company like Republic Services or UPS that have employees across the United States, having to provide PPE, they see it as just another cost. But that's where the union comes in terms of fighting for it, right? Whether it's through bargaining or also whether it's through pushing on local electeds. So here in the city of Los Angeles, the Teamsters alongside the LA County Federation of Labor were key in pushing on the city of Los Angeles to implement laws requiring PPE distribution to essential workers, social distancing at workplaces, including grocery stores, truck drivers, and all of that. And in terms of young workers, even though technically they're in a low risk pool in terms of their health, they're still if they're still working and out and about, they're still exposing themselves more so than other folks that may have, especially if you don't have the privilege of being able to work from home, like let's say other folks are able to do.
Thanks for sharing that. Okay, Amir, do you want to speak to if you feel safe at work? And then if you feel like being a young person has benefited you or not so much, and what precautions your employer has taken to keep workers safe?
Sure. Just to kind of piggyback on what Adon said, you know, being young and considered not at risk, it's its own double-edged sword, because they figure you're not at risk, but then you're constantly being thrown in the field and constantly being put in a position where you're at risk. So, you know, as opposed to they say, oh, you're at high risk, then go ahead and stay home and work. We're constantly going to work every day, and every day you walk out the door, you know, interact with people or touch things or work around equipment. It's more of a chance for low risk people to end up, you know, contracting the virus. But as far as working out in the field is concerned, my contractor's been very good about keeping us safe, as far as you know, personal protective equipment, gloves. These things are being given a little bit more liberally than before. They've kind of brought things in place like you know, spray bottles with sanitizers in them, things like that. And I've actually found out that we have people who actually drive around to the different job sites, to the different parts of the corridor, Crenshaw corridor, and make sure people are wearing their mask, because that's what they call a safety absolute on our job site, which is where, you know, these are basically rules that will get you sent home for 3 days, possibly terminated if you're not, you know, doing those things. So it wasn't an absolute before, but now not wearing a mask is considered a safety absolute. So they're making sure that we, you know, have our faces covered at all times. And I think that goes a long way, and, you know, making everybody else feel like they're safe. So it's definitely helped me personally.
Sweet. Okay. Crystal?
So like I said, you know, I stopped working fairly quickly when the pandemic got crazy. And at the beginning, it was just, I did not like feel safe. They told us like, oh, you got nothing to worry about. It's totally only affecting old people. And then I'm looking around like, what the hell? Like, anyone that was paying attention knew that that wasn't true. And also, like, a lot of the work we do, just like Amir was saying, like, it kind of makes some social distancing almost impossible. Like, if we both have to be holding something, or one has to be on one side and one has to be on the other side, like, there's no way we can do that. And they know that. So it's almost like, oh yeah, keep your distance, but like in a joking way, you know what I mean? And then also we were working in a tunnel. So the air quality down there is already crappy. You know what I mean? Like, if somebody sneezed anyway, it'd probably, you know, trickle its way down the way. Like, and then there's fans blowing air in certain places. And in my mind, that would only make the spreading of germs worse. Also, we were like, when we have to drill into like concrete or monocoat, which is like the stuff that they put on ceilings for like sound protection and stuff like that. We used to have to wear a mask. They would want us to wear the N95 mask. It was mandatory. And then when the pandemic broke out, it was like, oh, bring in whatever type of mask you have. Any face covering you have is more than fine, right? So I just thought that was kind of weird. Like, you know, for concrete, you know, our own homemade mask wasn't good enough, but for like a global pandemic that's killing people, that's totally fine. So there was just a lot of weird stuff that didn't really sit well with me. So that all played a part into me choosing to stay home.
Thanks. Okay, David, do you want to share how you feel safe or not at work, and as a young person, and the precautions that your employer has taken?
Yeah, so like I said earlier, I'm privileged and we're young. I don't live with any extended family. That's like, I don't have any grandparents at home. That'd be my main concern. And I've been giving my mom and brother, they have asthma and all these other preconditions, and I haven't been seeing them. So in terms of myself, I feel pretty safe. And yeah, they've taken precautions. The only I work for a good employer, and they've been on top of the mask wearing. We don't really have to interact with customers like directly, so that hasn't been a huge concern. The one instance I can think of is meetings. He would call us in these very cramped rooms, about like 20 of us, and it wasn't safe. And I mentioned that, and he our general manager said that they weren't mandatory because of that. But no, they've been taking safety pretty seriously, so I haven't had any major concerns at the grocery store. So yeah.
Well, that's good. I'm glad you feel safe at the grocery store because that's like the one place everyone is still going. Lucelena, do you want to share with us how you
Yeah,
feel?
for sure. So because we're a public agency, I think what I saw once COVID hit, our workplace, our bosses were just like scrambling to figure out what they're supposed to do. I think they definitely were doing it because they're mandated more than anything by LA County Public Health to follow certain rules. So they didn't want to get in trouble. So I remember they posted these like 6 pages worth of things. They had assigned memos of stuff that they were changing. Of course, we always feel like they make assigned memos so that if something happens, it's our fault. But you know, like there were things that our employers, at the beginning, we started talking about like, you know, we always have briefings in the morning and one day out of the week, we're all at work and that's 20 of us cramped in the room, like the size of the room that I'm in, right? Super tiny. And so it required us to have to bring stuff up. And I think that's the biggest problem, right? Like if you don't bring it up, they're not going to do anything. And so I felt like, yeah, they were creating all these mandates. And so, for example, they were talking about limiting staff. They still weren't moving yet. And they were saying they were going to do this and that, masks, all this other stuff, but they weren't moving yet. And so some of it really required us to bring stuff up. So we asked like, hey, can we do these briefings outdoors and spread apart, et cetera, et cetera. And so those things, little things happen. But honestly, our workplace, like I said, because they're a public agency, they had to follow certain mandates. And so they started implementing limited staff. They started implementing, they contracted out to get daily disinfection happen by contractors. And they had signs everywhere that said, you know, wear your masks. They hadn't, you know, we have a lot of chemical delivery truckers that come in. They wouldn't let them in the room anymore. They got porta potties. So they did some stuff. And so I think like, do I feel safe? You know, I mean, they were rotating us out of work for those of us in the field versus the admin workers. Like they actually sent the admin workers home and they had us rotate home and actually get paid. But once they put all of the stuff in place, they brought all of us field workers back. And the admin workers are still working from home. And so I just feel like also it's not to pit myself against admin workers because honestly, it's not like they get paid a shit ton, you know, to be honest, excuse my language. But the one thing I also want to add, the last thing I'll say here is, you know, like our bosses are doing something, but as young workers, like I know that, you know, there are young people who are dying too, right? Like it's not just older folks who are dying. It's not just people with preconditions. Young folks are also dying. And if not, we are definitely responsible for spreading stuff if we're not getting tested, if we don't know if we have it. I'm always asking the question, why aren't essential workers getting tests like all the time? Not, you know, forced, but if you want it, you should get tested. And we should know if we're bringing it back to our families, if we're spreading it to our friends, if we're not really holding to the social distancing. And then the last thing I'll say too, or the last I promise thing, is I think part of why I don't feel safe too is just the culture. Again, just talking about our work cultures. You know, there are different workers that come from all walks of life. There are definitely some workers that believe our administration and model after our administration, our presidential administration, that are like not wearing masks, feel like it's a trampling of their individual rights, that they don't get to wear masks or that they have to wear masks. And then also don't want to like listen to the public health officials, and that trickles into our workplaces and our bosses can't do anything about that. And so I think part of what I know that I've done is like, I wear mine no matter what, because I don't want to get sick and I don't want to get my people sick. And honestly, sometimes even just wearing it reminds everybody else to just just wear their masks and models it. But it's also like about having uncomfortable but respectful conversations with each other about like, or even like asking folks like what is going on and having discussions about like with each other, how are we keeping each other safe? Because it's worth caring for each other and caring for our families.
Okay, Amir, I see that you had raised your hand. Did you have more to say about how you feel safe at work and precautions your employer has taken?
Yes, it seems like I get more ideas as I listen to the other panelists speak. One thing I wanted to say was that within the last month and a half, I'd say maybe 1.5 months, they've instituted temperature checks to get on job sites. So that's something that they weren't doing before. You know, you walk up, you give the people your employee ID. It's usually done by the EMTs on staff. They ask you the questions everybody asks. You know, have you been out of the country within the last 14 days? Dealt with someone who's been sick or what have you? And then they have like a thermometer. It's kind of like a radar gun. They kind of put next to your forehead, take your temperature, make sure you're not running a temp before you enter the job site. So that's one precaution that they've taken. Also, Luz reminded me as well when she spoke about, you know, meetings and everybody being cramped in a room. One thing that we have to do in the field, because we have a physical job, we have to perform stretch and flex activities. And they kind of stopped the big circle of people performing the stretch and flex. And what they've done now is kind of broken it down where everybody can kind of go to their own little corner and do what they need to do. It's no longer really a group activity. So I just wanted to bring that up real quick.
Okay, cool. So that's like when there was like a whole group of every contractor doing it, now just individual contractors are doing it. Is that what I'm hearing? Yes? Okay, cool. Let's see. I'm gonna screen share into what our next question is. So solutions. So some solutions to COVID-19 and the issue of the pandemic. If you have paid sick time, right? If you feel sick, you can just use that time to take off. I know, Lucelena, you alluded to people not necessarily feeling like they can, but maybe you could elaborate on that in your answer. And then also, do you feel confident that your safety concerns would be addressed at your workplace? So if someone brings something up, are they going to do something about it? Or are they going to be like, yes, okay, noted, and never do anything about it? And then if you've brought any other specific safety concerns up, and then what happened with that? Was it addressed? Was it ignored? Or what happened with that? And then Adan, maybe you can speak to, I don't know if you know the inner workings of the office, but how people are communicating in their concerns, and how the leadership of your union is addressing those issues.
Sure. So in terms of, you know, the union staff, basically our executive board has taken the utmost precautions to ensure our safety, right, which we appreciate. And then in terms of, you know, our membership, you know, really ensuring that, you know, we are educating our members about the rights and really, you know, not giving an inch with the companies, right? And I think that's the one thing where I think a lot of workers are really seeing the benefits of collective bargaining during this pandemic, in the sense of, you know, with the union, with the voice on the job, workers are able to bring up their concerns without fear of retaliation and get those concerns resolved, right? And if not, you know, there's a process for that, for resolving that. So I think, you know, even in the media, you know, you have all of a sudden the media is, you know, infatuated with essential workers and the great work that they do, but workers aren't necessarily seeing that reflected in their paychecks or in the way they're being treated. So that, you know, I think workers are starting to say, well, you know, if we're so essential and our work is this important, it's time that we are treated with more respect, that we, you know, we're allowed to work safely, and if not, we're going to take action about it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Let's see. Amir, do you want to share if you have paid sick time, and do you feel confident that your safety concerns would be addressed at work, and have you brought any up? And then how did that go?
Unfortunately, no. My union does not have any paid sick time negotiated in our collective bargaining agreement. That's been obviously a very hot topic for years. I'm sure at least long before I got into the union. But as of right now, the way it's set up is if you don't work, you don't get paid. Holidays, sick time, none of that. As far as safety concerns, I think the majority of them were pretty much taken care of. I didn't have any personally that I asked for, but I feel like if I did stir the pot, if you will. I think that things would get done. People would definitely, take the proper precautions to make sure that we feel safe. So I guess that's the best way I can answer that question.
Okay, thanks. That's interesting, by the way, that having a safety concern is stirring the pot. Okay, Crystal, do you want to talk about how you feel about safety concerns at
All
the
the
workplace?
things, yes. I'm same union as Amir. I do not have paid sick time. We actually started an exploratory committee to kind of talk about how we can maybe make that happen in the near future. And especially because so many people are talking about it when it comes to COVID, we're trying to like ride that wave and continue that momentum into like making things happen. I think that some safety concerns, I received some phone calls from other people like asking for advice and questions. Like, I think they've been answered and met. But the thing is like, I think somebody else was saying earlier, it's like, it's kind of like a reaction. It's not so much because the contractors care about our safety and well-being, but it's a reaction to like, oh, the state's mandating these laws, so let me do all this stuff, like, or, oh man, my crew might walk off the job and that's going to mess with production, so let me do all this stuff. So not, like I said, not because they so much care about the safety and well-being, but more so about the bottom line, which is getting the job done on time and under budget. And, anybody messing with production, of course, wouldn't happen. So I think in that way, it's a blessing in disguise because they are jumping on all the complaints because they don't want that to be messed with. I wish it was just because they cared about people's safety and well-being, but whatever, we'll take what we can get. That's all.
Okay, Lucelena, do you want to share with us if you have shared any safety concerns at work and if you have sick time?
Yeah, I can answer the sick time really easy. We do have sick time. We have paid sick time because of what's in our union contract. But like I mentioned before, just to repeat it, because of the culture at work, sick time is looked down upon, the use of our sick time, even if it's earned. So I feel like people struggle to use their sick time. So for those of you who are gonna fight for it, you might as well also talk about why it's worth using your sick time. And I feel like it's very easy then folks blame workers for misusing it and all this other stuff, but honestly, it's our time, it's our earned time, and we should be able to use it when we feel like we need to use it. So, but because the culture looks down upon the use of sick time, I feel like, and also because we only get a certain amount, then, folks are using it sometimes not just for themselves, they're using it for their kids, they're using it for family members that they need to take to the hospital, things of that sort. And so we folks probably would just not really use their sick time if we had to burn through our regular sick time. And so what we were trying to do was ask and push for this idea of we need COVID-19 paid sick time. So, I wasn't hearing anything from the union directly. We don't have the best communication. Some of our unions have some real work to do in terms of talking to their members and being in communication with their members, and our union is one of those. But I did reach out to the steward, and I heard that they were having HR meetings, and that was one of the concerns that was being brought up. So, and then they ended up creating a certain amount of tiers for people to actually, if you actually had COVID, or if the doctor said you might have COVID, then you actually get sick time for COVID specifically. So that ended up getting implemented. I'm really curious what's gonna happen now with this second surge, actually continued surge, but what everybody thinks is a second surge, to see like if they're gonna change anything, if they're gonna actually start rotating us again, we'll see what happens. And then just to be clear, one other thing is just the thing that I mentioned before, which was the day that like operations at our work site, all 20 of us had to be in this tiny ass room. We did ask for, and I asked, and another coworker backed me up and saying, hey, can we not all get cramped in that room? Can we please meet outside? So they started doing it that way. And then they started staggering our start times and our end times and things of that sort. So, but you had to say something, otherwise they're not gonna do it on their own. At least that's my experience.
Yeah, I notice sometimes they maybe don't think things through. Oh, that's my trash cans if you can hear that. Sorry, friends. Okay, so let's see. Now on to, I think we lost David here, so maybe he'll be back, and maybe perhaps not sure on that one. But I think our next question, we're gonna go ahead and share, oops. I don't know, all my buttons are crazy right now. Let's see.
Linda, I know we're just at 7:30, but you know, people are welcome to stick around if you're able. Can continue this conversation for a little bit longer. So I just want to thank our panelists too for sticking on a little bit longer. So thanks, guys.
Yes, for sure. You guys are the best. I love you. So I think now we'll turn into a more systematic oppression, right? So where we were looking at that circle of domination and oppression, right? Every structure, every line of work, everything has its systematic oppression, the way they're dealing with things. So maybe if everyone, if we could share in what ways is there a systematic oppression in your industry, so like specific to what you do, and then also like in your union, and then if you don't have a union, just with your employer. And Adan, do you want to go first with that?
Sure. So I would say in terms of, you know, systemic oppression, one thing to acknowledge is that a significant number of our membership, right, at Local 396 are people of color, right, and women. And so one thing to keep in mind is, you know, historically people of color have been, you know, what's been said as last hired and first fired. So, you know, taking on more dangerous jobs, jobs with lower pay. And so we, you know, we still see that, right? And I think that's why it's also, you know, you know, from the Teamsters perspective, organizing is of the utmost importance because the union contract helps to eliminate wage disparities between men and women, between racial, you know, different racial groups, right? It's the union contract can help to, you know, be that equalizer. And so with that being said, it's, you know, acknowledging that, right? How do we help to get folks, you know, people of color into good union jobs and to, you know, divert folks from the, you know, school to prison pipeline and things of that sort.
Yeah, there are plenty of, I think in a second we're going to talk about ways that unionism can help come from that. But Adan, how would you say that they're like in your union or in your industry, right? Like how specifically is there oppression there? Like,
yeah. So, you know, for example, just like in the, you know, in the sanitation industry, right? These are the majority workers of color. There hasn't, you know, historically, these workers have had lower wages, right? But, you know, thanks to their organizing, they've been able to improve, but it's still, you know, a battle, right? Of securing better wages, fighting for contract language that protects immigrant workers. That's been key, particularly in the sanitation industry. And that's stuff that's had to be fought for, right? Because, you know, workers are valued less. You know, there's this whole justification of immigrant workers will settle for less, or workers of color will settle for less, or we'll give them less than other workers. And so that's stuff that has to be fought for.
thank you. Okay, Amir, do you want to go ahead and share how you feel like there is systemic oppression in your industry and in your workplace?
Sure. I can probably answer this question from a couple of different spectrums. As far as a hierarchy is concerned, you know, in the job site in our union, you know, we have general foremen on down to the foreman, down to the journey level employees. And then you have apprentices and CWs. We won't get into all that, but apprentices pretty much at the bottom of the totem pole. And this is in no way meant to badmouth my union. It's just a part of the culture. I'm proud of my experiences as an apprentice, but you know, apprentices are basically, you know, they're the future. They're the people who the journeymen are supposed to be teaching, working hand in hand with every day. But I think that we can be oppressed at times, you know, with the way that we're spoken to. You know, they pretty much we're classified as cheap labor. And, you know, you have a handful of journey level workers who will always remind you know, that you're expendable, you're cheap labor, we can get another one of you, you know, no problem, and stuff like that. So you have to kind of learn to roll with it and just realize what you're here to do, that you're here to do a job, and try to soak up as much as you can, whether the journey level worker that you're working with is a good person or a bad person. You have to soak up the good things from everybody. But there's times where you can feel depressed and definitely oppressed, you know, working as an apprentice. But, you know, it's part of the job. It's what you sign up for. You know that, hey, you're going to come in being the low man on the totem pole, and, you know, you have to work your way up. As far as from a racial standpoint, I think that try not to get too controversial, but I don't know, as an African-American apprentice, I don't know, I think that there's a negative stigma about us. I think that when African-American, you know, electrician comes on a job site, I think right off the bat, he or she is classified as probably being lazy or combative. You know, I've kind of dealt with things like that in the past. A few bouts with racism. I'm not sure if you guys want to dive too far into that, but I've definitely seen it on my end. That's what I'll share for now.
So we're not in the post-racial society that we keep talking about. Is that what you're saying, Amir?
Not at all.
Okay, Crystal, you want to share?
Yeah, I'll go next. So kind of also Amir kind of touched on this a little, but yeah, on our job sites, like when it comes to like general foreman, most of the foremen and general foremen, superintendents, for our local, like our top tier representatives, for our districts, the country's broke up into 9 districts, and each of these have a bunch of representatives. And also the top executives at our international office, they are all straight white men, right? So even in Los Angeles, where I'm pretty sure that like 85% of our membership are people of color, the top 5 people that carry all the power are straight white men. So in my opinion, like people in power kind of try to surround themselves with people that are going to help them preserve that power, right? So I think at times like this, especially with all the stuff that's going on in the world right now, it's really important to look at like who's comfortable, right? Like who's not talking about it and who is doing just fine, you know, sitting where they're sitting, and doesn't feel like they have to try to change things and make the world and our local a better place. Like Amir said, also, like I'm in no way trying to bash my union. I'm so grateful for everything that I have and everything that this union has given me. But I think that if we were to sit here and say that our local couldn't be better, that would be a mistake. I think we always, as a local, as a union, have to look at ourselves and be like, how can we, as a family and a union, how can we be better? And we need to always be working towards that. And I feel like that just doesn't happen enough. That's all I got.
Thank you. Okay, Lucelena, do you want to share about systematic oppression in your industry? Such a word.
Yeah, I think because people have spoken to like specific stuff, I'm just gonna take it out a little bit, hearing what folks are saying. I feel like when I think about my workplace or when I think about my union, I feel like our spaces are reflective of systemic oppression in society. And so like when I think about, for example, I was speaking a lot to culture earlier in terms of like culture, caring for each other, and what does that mean, and culture around sick time. And so I think about like when I think about this moment, and especially this moment with all the Black Lives Matters uprisings and what they're demanding, rightfully so, I feel like it's not just about 1 or 2 bad people. It's really about a broader issue, which is why I think about it as systemic. And so when I think about what they're challenging white supremacy. And white supremacy culture really shows up in our workplaces. It shows up in my workplace and shows up in my union. And just to give this, what I'm gonna list right now are the things that I think about, not that I think about, that I've learned through some organizations that think a lot about white supremacy culture and the impact that that has in our lives and in our workspaces. And so like the culture looks like perfectionism. It looks like a never ending sense of urgency. Like you have to. It sounds a lot like what happens with definitely in IBEW's work. And lots of workplaces, my workplace too. And man, we're just cleaning water. Water comes in, water leaves. You know, unless there's like a power dip, we don't have to be running around like there's some crazy urgency, but that's part of white supremacy culture. Other things, feedback or new ideas are received with defensiveness and mistrust. Worship of the written word. You know, lots of folks don't have access to education like everyone else, but everything that's written is law. Like that stuff is also problematic. Power hoarding, little experience or discomfort working in teams. Like everything is about the individual only. And there's lots of other characteristics. So I just want to shout out SEIU, which is the showing up for racial justice. That's, I was kind of referencing some of the stuff I've learned from them. And I feel like those characteristics run all the way to the top. And I'll say this much, my workplace is run by a man of color, but it doesn't matter. White supremacy culture affects both white folks and BIPOC, so Black, Indigenous, people of color. And so it doesn't matter who's at the top if we're not asking ourselves the impact of white supremacy culture and the way that we practice it or we repeat it because that's what we've learned. And that goes for patriarchy, it goes for ableism, it goes for heterosexism, it goes for a lot of other systemic oppressions. I would say that show up in the way we relate to each other and in the way that we run our workplaces and our unions.
Okay, so I know that Louis Elena, you also had some place to be, and so since you brought up some other places where you've learned some things, if maybe you want to briefly talk to some solutions to systematic oppression in your industry and in your union that you've been thinking about, and maybe we'll go like backwards for this answer situation.
Yeah, I mean, there are big answers. And then I think when I think about, like, I appreciate what you said. It's like, you know, we're not going to change everything overnight. So I feel like what comes to mind for me is get curious about what systemic oppression is, right? Like, what is white supremacy culture? And I feel like when people say white supremacy, they always think about the KKK or they think about some of the worst examples of white supremacy. But white supremacy happens in really small ways all the time. And so I'm like, get curious, what does that mean? How does it show up in me? How does it show up in my organizing? How does it show up in my union? How does it show up, you know, in the space, in my family, things of that sort. And then learn from others that are doing this work. Like people have been thinking about this for centuries. So, you know, like there's a lot of places to learn from and people to learn from on how to do this work and how to do those reflections. And then honestly, it's really about start talking about it with people. Last 2 weekends ago, I was in my workplace, and there's this older gentleman who's a white man who's been having lots of questions come up because his daughter's participating in BLM protests. And, you know, I had, you know, there's a lot of stuff that will get said that triggers me like crazy. But honestly, you know, at that point, like if I get triggered the whole time and I can't have a conversation with him, the work doesn't get done. And so what I think about is start bringing it up and not with everyone, because some people may not be able to have the conversation at all, but, you know, like bring it up with your coworkers, you know, and do it out of a place of respect and curiosity and get in there with people. And then, you know, and build those relationships, bring it up in your union. Because honestly, I just feel like change doesn't happen unless people are unified, but you don't unify people unless you can build relationships between each other. And that stuff doesn't happen overnight. And if you stay on the surface, I feel like you got to really build. And that means getting in there with really uncomfortable conversations. And I'm just going to say it, but it also takes just a lot of love and a lot of rigor. And I'm going to props generative somatics for teaching me that. So if folks have questions about SEIU or generative somatics, I'm no expert, but they can ask me more about it. So that's my 2 cents for now.
Thank you for that. Okay, so continuing our backward circle, Crystal, do you want to talk about some solutions to systematic oppression in your industry or union?
Yeah, I think what we can do is like organizing for like in more of a way that's not just about recruitment, right? It's not just about getting the numbers, but organizing in a way where like we're also looking for like independent thinkers like ourselves, looking for people, like I was talking about comfort earlier, like looking for people that are uncomfortable with the status of our union, that are uncomfortable with the status of our country, and also trying to give these people an opportunity to grow and develop as union leaders, and not just, you know, picking and anointing the people that are going to protect our positions of power, but picking and bringing along people that want to help make our union a better place and the best that it can be. So I think that's a good place to start. I think that's what we're trying to do at Renew, and it seems to be going pretty well. I'm super excited about it. And yeah, that's all I got for that.
Okay, thank you. Amir, do you want to speak to this massive topic?
Sure. I mean, when it comes down to, you know, as I mentioned before, the racial stigmas and stuff like that, I think that it starts and ends with us. You know, it's not for us to sit around and play victim. We have to definitely, you know, take the bull by the horns and get out there and end the stigmas ourselves. People believe that we're lazy, you know, by default. We have to do our job and go out there and, you know, put in the extra effort to show that, hey, this is not who we are. You know, people think that we're late all the time, and make it a point to be early. You know, just little simple things like that. And we have to also take it upon ourselves to assume positions of leadership. That's why I'm so very proud and thankful, you know, to young ladies like Crystal, you know, for assuming a leadership position and trying to make the union a better place, you know, for everybody. And I appreciate her for incorporating me, you know, myself into, you know, forums like this. In a moment, you know, you may not realize like how big of a gesture it is to be invited to participate in something like this, but you know, I see what she's doing and I appreciate that. But that's definitely one thing that we can do to, you know, change the stigmas and to, you know, just basically be proactive and take it upon ourselves. We're not victims. It's not, you know, other people's fault that they're in charge, that they're running things. We have to take it upon ourselves to say, hey, you know what? We're gonna change history, and it starts with us.
Thank you. Alan, do you want to share about ways that systematic oppression can be dismantled in your industry?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really about, you know, people of, you know, color continuing to move up in position of leadership. So I'm very proud to have a principal officer who's a person of color and is one of the highest ranking people of color in our union, but also kind of, you know, continuing that legacy, taking positions of power, right, and voicing those concerns, because if they're not, then it's just going to continue repeating itself. So it's really about continue advocating, continuing. There's always a fight, right, and it's about fighting for that equity, right, and making our voices heard.
Thank you. Okay, I think now, thanks everyone for hanging on with us. I know it's been a little long. I know that Linda, you had mentioned that there were some questions that were going online. I don't know if you want to come in and bring those up and ask them, and whoever can stick around and answer them, that would be great. And then maybe if we have some audience participation, that might be cool too.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you so much, everybody. And yeah, so we had a couple of questions emailed in beforehand, and I'll go ahead and read one of them, and I'm sure it's fine to share. It's from Michael Contreras, so thank you for sending that in, brother. And this question is, how can workers join together to support the People's Budget LA? Oh, I'm sorry, wrong question. It's this one. What is the best way to help educate and involve younger folks into the labor movement? How can we take advantage of this time being in COVID-19 in terms of organizing younger folks to join the fight? Which I think is a really important question. So thank you for sharing that.
Okay, is anyone burning to answer this
I
question?
think
Amir, look at you. So cute.
I'm such a big advocate for this. As far as incorporating more, young workers into the labor movement, it starts in high school. I mean, if you guys can think back to high school, whenever you guys have had a visitor come to your school, everybody asks, hey, who's all going to college? By show of hands, who's taking the SAT? Who's taking the PSAT? College is always shoved down every high school student's throat, every junior high school student's throat. And don't get me wrong, college is important, especially for, people who are or going to college and they're the first people in their families to do so. But even speaking to someone who has, a degree, college isn't for everybody. And I think back and I say to myself, if I could do things all over again, maybe that 2 years that I spent getting an associate's degree would be 2 more years I could have spent in the union, making money, and solidifying my future. I think that there's a lot of students and a lot of children, or a lot of teenagers who don't know that this is out there for them. They don't know that they can make, up to 6 figures working with their hands. They think that they have to go to college, they have to take out these student loans and, work as an intern in order to get a high paying position and spend, the next 10 years of their career paying off their loans. And it doesn't have to be that way. It's up to us to find ways to get outreach to the high school students and the students, as young as middle school. Let them know that, these labor unions, these trades are out there for you. It doesn't have to be electrical, it doesn't have to be plumbing, carpentry. There's culinary, cosmetology. It's out there for us, but all these students are being exposed to is college. And there's nothing wrong with college, but like I said, it's not for everybody. So that's what I want to say about that.
Yeah, and that's specific to like knowing about the trades, and that's one of the big factors of ways that people choose to be in a union is if they're in a trades union. Does anyone else have an answer about how to get young people more involved? Maybe.
This is Alan. Definitely in terms of, I think unions could, continue outreach in schools like the brother mentioned, and also, through community organizations, right? And, through our communities ourselves, right? Union members also community, right? So reaching out to the youth, Boys and Girls Club, different, places, right? And, I think continuing to organize, because as with higher union density, more people know about unions or know someone in a union. At its height, 1 in 3 Americans were in a union, right? When union density was at its highest. And so that meant that even if you weren't in a union per se, you knew someone that was, or knew, or knew someone who knew someone that was in a union, right? And it was more common speak, right? Because it was higher density. So we continue to organize and really highlight the victories that have been won, right? And I think that's important, highlighting, using that as a way to engage in conversations. So for example, the city of LA passed ordinances for PPE that helped both union and non-union workers. Engaging folks in conversations, saying, well, the reason that law was passed was because of the efforts of labor unions, right? During the pandemic, it's been labor unions that have been out there hosting food drives. So engaging folks in the community, saying it was the unions that organized this, getting folks engaged around that labor unions aren't just doing stuff in the workplace, they're out in the community.
Thank you. Yeah, that's super smart. Lucelena, do you have something to share? Or also, if not, we can move on to, there's another question. Oh, Crystal, sorry.
Real quick, sorry. Also, like everybody's kind of been saying, outreach is key, right? That's super important, but also organizing to like not just grow the membership, but grow the active membership. I think it's really important that we get these young workers involved as soon as possible. That's why organizations like LA Young Workers or Renew over at IBEW are so important, because you know, it's teaching like labor history, like Adon was like just making sure that everybody has this like pride and knowledge about the power that we can all have when we work together. I think we need to talk to as many young workers as possible. And we do some outreach events, but I think there needs to be way more, but also the people doing the outreach events, like, I feel like these kids need to see themselves in the person that's sitting on the other side of that table, right? Like, our outreach director, I love her, she's my mentor, but she's an older white woman, right? So like, versus it being, you know, a person of color who's younger, who they can see themselves in, and they can be like, holy crap, like I can do this. So also getting young workers to be involved in that outreach, I think is gonna be key in us growing that active membership.
Add something real quick, and then I'm gonna have to get going. I just also think about with the current moment when a lot of young people have been incredibly activated around the one right now, the BLM uprisings, and then also the stuff around climate change. I know that like ILWU just shut down their ports in support of BLM's work. And it just makes me think about all those young folks that are out there that may not have had any relationship to unions and the current power of unions, because that's an example of union strength that I think will probably, you know, like stay, whether or not it does, but, you know, stay on the minds of a lot of young folks who are out there pushing for stuff that's happening right now in our time period. And so it just makes me think about like what relationship unions are currently have to the movements in the US that a lot of young people are participating in. So I just want to add that, and I just want to say thank you so much for the invite to join this panel. It's really great to meet all of you, and I'm going to get going. So have a great night. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Selena.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Linda, do you have some other questions?
We do. So it looks like we have one more question. And this was sent from a sister from Food and Water Watch on Action. And this question is, how can workers join together to support the People's Budget LA and have a chance of unionizing more jobs for a new economy that doesn't rely on racism, misogyny, and a low-wage workforce that funnels profit, power, and resources to a few unaccountable assholes? Winky face. Which also, you know, is a very, very interesting question. So thank you so much for sending that in.
Does anyone have an immediate thought about that, Avan?
Yeah, you know, Malcolm X once said that we needed to use, you know, by any means necessary. So that means that everything that we have at our disposal, we need to do, right? So that means organizing in our workplaces, organizing unions. That means also organizing politically, meaning voting, but also encouraging union members to run for office, right? And that means neighborhood councils, school boards. You know, I myself was supported by my local union to run for a local delegate for the assembly district for my Democratic district. Something I had never done before, but I was encouraged to do so by my union. So I would say that by continuing to organize and to do that, we'll be able to, you know, make our voices heard, and also demand more accountability. I think one thing is for sure that coming out of the pandemic, I hope things don't go back to normal, because normal wasn't okay, right? In terms of where folks were working people were in terms of wages, in terms of working conditions, in terms of access to healthcare. And I think people, as we continue to go through the season that we're living through, folks are realizing that change, demanding change is necessary. Absolutely, that we're not going to get out of this in a positive way if we don't. And so that means continue to organize and engage and make our voices heard in our workplaces, at the at the ballot box, you know, and ultimately it's all about organizing.
Here, here.
Yeah. Crystal, Amir, I
I'm
see
still
you've
thinking.
unmuted yourself.
I'm just gonna say that Don pretty much summed it up. It should be my scapegoat for not knowing where to begin answering such an elaborate question. Great job, Don. I appreciate you, brother.
Just threw it back at me. Okay, so yeah, just organize. I mean, I think young people are gonna be key in all this stuff. And then as far as like making sure everything's not left to well, I think what was the quote? It was like the few unaccountable assholes. I mean, that's also gonna be up to us trying to put ourselves in positions of power and bringing our people with us, right? Like, just like I said, looking for other people that are also uncomfortable. Like Adam was saying, we don't want to go back to normal. The normal, that was working for the few, but it wasn't working for everyone else. So that's not good enough, right? So we want to continue to ride this wave into something new. And I think there's a lot of great possibilities with all the movements that are going on. And I mean, a lot of them are young worker driven. A lot of them are women driven. There's just like great stuff going on right now. So just, we have to get involved, pressure our unions to get involved. Even if we feel like they might not be ready for it, we have to kind of put it in a way where they can't help but see it and they can't help but pay attention. And I think that comes from strategic thinking. And if we all just put our heads together, and I mean, I always try to surround myself with like the smartest people in the room, right? I'm like, come with me, I want to be with you, let's do this. So I think if we continue to do that, we're going to come with some great ideas and just change this whole thing top to bottom, or bottom to top.
Yes, Linda, yeah.
And too, I mean, I just wanted to say too, I mean, I know there's a lot of talk about like organizing, and a lot of times people think that that's strictly means union organizing and workplace organizing, but really, I mean, we've got to remember that there's community organizing. There's, you know, we can talk to our friends, our family, our neighbors, our, you know, it doesn't have to be just about a workplace. It really is a broader ideology about just bringing people together and focused on an issue. And I just think that's an important distinction, because a lot of times like organizing seems to be a loaded term, but it's really not. It's just about getting together to fix a problem. And that's really all it is. So I just wanted to just, you know, make that distinction for anyone here who's on this Zoom or call or however you're joining, to know that it's open-ended. So.
If I could, not that I'm a panelist, but I just wanted to mention like the People's Budget LA, like that concept and that idea. Prior to being an electrician, I was a banker. And so for me, it makes a whole lot of sense, like follow the money. If you want to know what your city, what your organization, what your anything is prioritizing, generally it's where the action is, and the action is with money in the capitalist society that we live in. And so if their policies and if their money is all going towards something that supports things that you don't, or that you don't want, you know, you need to know that. And that requires, you know, sometimes a high level of personal education on what's going on. But as you read through these things, you know, you'll see like, we don't need, like, the police department doesn't need a tank, like, and no one is going to pretend like there's a lot of conversations about what is or isn't necessary. But if these policies aren't anti-racist, if the things that we're spending our money on isn't anti-racist, then that's a problem. And at the very least, those things we have to move on from. And so very much so, it's a space for I think, for self-education, for educating your friends and your family, and then making big moves, organizing, even community groups to say like, no, this is not where we're going to put our money, which is super, super important. Linda, do you have any other questions? Or I see we're at 8:06.
There are no more questions, no more hands raised. If anyone has any last minute questions, feel free to enter them now. Otherwise, I mean, I think we could definitely probably do a part 2 and 3 of this, you know,
Oh yeah.
series easily, which we may do. So we'll, you know, we'll see if there's interest for that. But yeah, I think it looks like we're ready to wrap. If there are any final thoughts, please feel free to share. Anybody?
Thoughts?
Final thoughts. Yeah, just like kind of to piggyback off of what Selena was saying, like it's not enough to be not racist, you need to be anti-racist. Like, and that means a lot of not letting, excuse my language, but not letting shit slide. You know, like with a lot of people around us. I know that ever since George Floyd was killed, I've been in all-out Facebook battles, like, and it's exhausting and it's emotional and it's a lot, but it still needs to be done. And even with people that I love and care about, it still needs to be done. So I think the more we call this BS out and we say, hey, I'm not going to let this slide in my space or any space, right? The closer we get to a world that that we want to be in, and the world that we want to make, you know, for our kids and stuff. That's all I got.
Very much agreed. Well said. All right. Well, I think it's past everyone's bedtime or dinner time or whatever we need to do. We went over. I think this just goes to show this is a huge topic that is so deserving of much more conversation. Thank you all the attendees so much for sticking on. And thank you so much to the panelists, and Selena and Crystal, you guys are my idols. I just love you more than words. So thank you guys so much. Let's do this again soon. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, you guys are the best. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Appreciate it.
All right. Everyone be safe and well. We'll see you
Have a
next
great
time.
week.
Bye, pals.